Welcome to the City of Columbus special meeting of the Committee of the Whole. The time is 6:06 p.m. 6:09 p.m. Sorry. Pat, if you could please take a roll call.
Gray is absent. Johnson. Reed is excused. Ryan.
Here.
Tylen.
Here.
Tome. Here. Traxler.
Here. Okay, this meeting was noticed in accordance with state statutes and local ordinances. First thing we need to do is approve the agenda.
Motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the agenda as presented. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the agenda is approved. First thing up, number 4, discuss and consider potential changes to the Columbus Columbus Emergency Management Service District. I don't know who staff wants to talk about this. There you go.
So in your packet was information, emails that came across, and Randy Keene attended the meeting then. So after some discussion, Pat and I believe Mayor Tom, Kim, we were involved in, should we forward this on to, Paul Johnson for comment? And so I think probably our the biggest takeaway from Paul's information is to look at his second paragraph and say and follow. I believe a better approach is to have Reesville and Lowell join as temporary members like Fall River did. And then they could join in the contract that would come up with, or that part of the next agreement that would come up. So
Okay. Do you know if they'd be adding another station, or is it still all gonna run out of the Columbus?
as far as I know, everything's still running out of Columbus, especially they made the comment that it would be adding their additional, I think, 60 calls. They didn't think would be an issue. So
I do read the report we get monthly or quarterly or maybe monthly on the EMS, and I do see they already missed some calls on timing. There's certain guidelines they have to follow, and I do see that they have already missed some, and it's pretty consistent, 1 or 2 here and there. So I'd be a little concerned about adding Lowell, which is what, 15 minutes away, 10 minutes.
yeah, probably more like 15.
15.
Yeah.
Lowell, Reesville. I'd be a little concerned about that. I do see Paul's note where, sure, they can contract with them at any time separately.
Yeah.
I would like to know where they would be hubbed out of then if they did that separately. Would anybody know that?
It's still all gonna be based on the current station. It's just adding another municipality. That's my understanding.
I mean, if we added them to the district, it would be there. If we didn't and they did this contract separately, it'd be the same. They would still.
Yeah, I mean, it's a Columbus area EMS group, so it's just basically adding two more municipalities to that group.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
I think the thing to remember here is that there is a committee that oversees that EMS group. Formerly the administrator was our representative on there. I was an alternate. That's why Randy asked Randy to attend when I was unable to, just to kind of get a sense of what was happening. Randy was going to respond, and then Jeff Slott had sent out the summary to myself and others, which kind of outlined what had been discussed at the meeting. I think Paul's terminology in here about a better approach is to have Reesville and Lowell join as temporary members like Fall River once did under the existing terms. And if you read the meeting minutes from that were sent by Jeff Slott, it says it was discussed that it may be easiest to enter into a short short-term agreement with each community for 2020. I think those are two different approaches, even though they're similar. But my concern was, what rights do we have in the current contract? And if we're going to be working on a temporary contract, that's going to have to be done by every member community in this group, and they want to have this effective for 2020. So there's a very short time span to get that done. And in that, we would receive I guess, kind of a refund for the extra revenue that's being put in by the two new municipalities. So we would receive about 40 cent per capita to reduce our costs for this year. Then there would have to be a completely new agreement with all of the entities that would work out for 2021. So this is the last year of the contract. So I guess logistically we can offer comment. However, it's going to have to get back to the CA-EMS group to see if they're willing to take any recommendations from us and whether everybody else would want to follow suit there. That's the unknown at this point, or how we want to respond to them.
Okay. Comments on this, council? So what they need from us is our stance on how we feel about this, essentially. Comment for their meeting.
Essentially for 1 year, yeah, that's what we're looking at, is this last year of our contract, whether we're willing to include Reeseville and Lowell into that for 1 year to try it out. Then there would have to be a new contract for the entire municipal group starting 2021.
That, okay. Gotcha. Okay. What's the will of the council? I'm hesitant, but to do this, based off of my what I'm reading in reports already. But if it's a temporary thing, we can see. I mean, I'm willing to give it a shot for a year, but I don't know if letting him in the door then pretty much puts him in the door, going forward, regardless of what happens. And I also don't know what our recourse is if they're not meeting timing on calls, they're missing the standard. I don't know what our recourse is. They consistently start doing that. So that would be another concern.
I think that if we have 1 year to try it on, I know when I had first talked to Chief Kane about it, he asked me the question right away, will they be adding another ambulance? And they have 2 on staff at all times right now. So I think that's obviously something we can watch over the next year. And if it becomes a concern, that's something we'd have to negotiate a new contract with Lifestar and the other communities as well. So I think that for the overall cost that we pay for the service annually, it's incredibly inexpensive per capita for what we get. And since it's located in Columbus, we're the closest to their hub, I guess, unless they have multiple calls outside of the community. So I don't think we're losing much. My main concern was the way that they had asked to kind of do this with having every community have a short-term agreement with them, how we're going to do that effectively and timely versus looking at what Paul had suggested to have Reeseville and Lowell join as temporary members like Paul River once did. If that's a concern, we can draft a letter to the group and have them look at that and say, does this work better for you logistically this year to get this completed? Because then we're not waiving any of our rights that we have in the contract already. Any other community that's part of it's not waiving their rights or starting over with a new contract for 1 year.
Okay. Any other thoughts on? Any opposition of letting them try for the year? Okay. All right. So
Move forward.
yeah.
Are we okay with their with
I
their
guess
recommendation, or do you want to look further into what Attorney Johnson had recommended? 'Cause
I would like to look at Attorney Johnson. I would like Attorney Johnson's scenario better, but I don't know how to. Do we just draft a letter and then everyone looks at it?
I can reach out to Jeff and let him know what our attorney said and just see what his response is. It may be easier for them. I'm not sure if they're aware of that. Otherwise, I don't know what our motion's going to be at our next regular meeting. Because, we're okay with this, but
Yeah.
then internally they have to kind of navigate that stuff. So I can reach out to Jeff and follow up with him.
Okay, I appreciate that. Okay. Okay. You got that, Caitlin? Okay, next up, 2020 budget review. Go through the proposed 2020 budget. Any updated or new information pertaining to 2020 operating budgets, all funds. Kim, go ahead.
All right, first, thanks everybody. It's been a long haul. There's a lot of meetings and a lot of information that's been given to everybody. And so last week we had a meeting. We went through the last of the budgets, and I gave everybody kind of a highlight of what those changes were during the meeting, but I'll run through them real quickly. On the HLPC side, in the 2019 budget, there is some money set aside or in their budget for the Chapel Street water tower maintenance. At this moment in time, I'm going to be moving that money into a balance sheet account, and the money that is currently budgeted for 2020 will be under discussion with the council to determine how you want to manage that, whether it stay in the general fund or it goes back to HLPC as a donation into their Chapel Street water tower fund. In the fire department, we bumped up the annual safety inspection amount to $6,500 from $5,500 due to the increased cost of the inspections. For the senior center, and this also pertains to the recreation department, that position then went, the new part-time position that they're talking about, which would be 10 hours a week for each department, would go from $12.50 to $15 per hour. That was kind of approved by consensus of the council. In municipal court, we talked about the judge's idea of creating a sinking fund for his salary, and after discussion, we moved that back to $8,500. And then the judge brought forward some concerns about costs for special circumstances, that he would like to see additional money in the budget for. We talked about that again and landed on a $500 number. So $245 came from the clerical salary line and $255 from the judge's salary line to make up that $500 budget line for special circumstances that they might run onto during the upcoming year. We also relabeled the professional services attorneys line to just be professional services, which would include then any legal services that they would need throughout the year. In the CDA or the economic development budget, obviously the purchase of 103 Ludington Street is not happening at this time. So after discussion, $2,000 of the $5,000 budget for that property was moved into marketing and advertising, which would make that then a $5,000 budget for 2020. And the remaining $3,000 was moved into a business appreciation for the business appreciation lunch and its costs. We talked a little bit about the facade program, but it is not included in the 2020 budget. I think Matt talked about that possibly being rolled into the city loan program, which is a new fund for 2020. It is the loans that the city bought out from the revolving loan fund and now are defederalized, so the city can control those funds going forward and what they'd like to see happen with those. Matt indicated that the CDA was going to begin work in 2020 on policies and procedures applications for that potential loan program. The May Ward Beautification Fund, Matt brought forward some ideas on how to administer that fund, and we talked about the future and what would its purpose really be. gave everybody a cover sheet when we got the binder, and the binder has a scenario of the 2% salary increases with the recycling center costs
Can we-
included in the general fund. Yes.
Can we finish this one first? I have questions
Sure, go for it.
before we move on.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. On the court fund,
Yes.
for some reason I'm not seeing clerical salary line.
They had, it's right underneath the second line, under the judges in the spreadsheet.
You talking about court clerk?
Yes.
Oh, that's not what this says. That was confusing.
I'm sorry.
I didn't consider it to be clerical. Okay. Thank you. Any more questions on this, Ed? Thought you were reaching for your light, sorry. All right.
All right.
Okay, go ahead, sorry. I just had
No,
to
that's
check on
okay.
that.
The binder has the 2% wage increase plus recycling in the general fund. It hasn't been removed yet based on the fact that we need to make, the council would need to make that a conscious decision to do that. The cost for recycling center operations, revenues versus cost of net is $11,997 for 2020. So that's what we would be talking about if we move funds out of the general fund and into the trash and recycling fund, as we talked earlier. But, in your original binder, you had a cover sheet that was labeled for the full meeting. And that was based on everything that was in the binder before our meeting Thursday night. Because we made some changes Thursday night, we added some dollars. Those numbers did change slightly, and so what I handed out tonight is kind of a little more in-depth view of what that looks like. I'll go through what's here just real briefly and then kind of get into it in more depth. The first two pages are really just that. They're just taking the numbers and breaking down the 4 scenarios that we talked about into mill rates and levy amounts. So it gives you a picture of where we are if we levy from budget or if we levy from the different options that we have available to us. And I'll go through that here in just a second. The next grouping, where it says levy and mill rate scenarios, are the pages 3 through maybe 8, are based on just the levy scenarios that are open to us right now, using the state allowed levy limit and the allowable increase and a potential to use a small amount of debt service. And then lastly is everything based on budget. And it's more in depth than what you got in that initial cover page that you got on the levy. And part of the reason for that is I think that we're getting to a point now where we're getting closer to making a decision on the budget. We've gotten through all the different budget presentations. One thing that's always a component of the budget and the mill rate and the levy is the TIF district. And that's not something we have any control over, but it does, however, impact the overall mill rate that people pay. And it impacts the school, MATC, the city, and the county. So it does have an overall, it needs to be, I want you to see it as we go through the various discussions. So getting back to the first 2 pages, just to give you a picture of the different scenarios. We have 4 scenarios out there running right now. One is a 2% wage increase with recycling in the general fund. One is a 2% increase in wages without the recycling center in the general fund. That's moving it to the trash and recycling fund and adding it to that charge that you see on the tax bills each year. Then the same thing applies to scenarios 3 and 4, only it's a 3% increase for wages with recycling in the general fund and a 3% without the those are the four scenarios that are running right now, all concurrently with each other until, final decisions are made and we can kind of settle on one. To go into all the little pretty colors that are in the different scenarios, let me just run through those two. And it's the same principle for each one. When you look at everything highlighted in yellow, that is the mill rate that's created by using the from budget number. In other words, if you looked at the 2% with recycling in the general fund budget, you're going to see the need to levy $3,336,650. If you take that dollar amount and you calculate it based on the assessed value, you come up with a mill rate of $7.79 roughly. So that's the yellow, and that's the same principle in each one of these scenarios. It's based on what we would need to levy as a budget for each one of those different scenarios, with recycling, without recycling, 2% versus 3%. And so it kind of gives you a picture of what that mill rate would look like before TIF if we levied what we actually need to budget, for the budget. Now when you look at the next line down, it actually is looking at it with the levy limit that we're allowed by state, plus we can charge back the $10,284 that we had to pay out in rescinded or repealed taxes this last year. And that's $3,236,593. And then you can see the resulting mill rate from that again in the green, which is $7.55. The third line down is in a light blue, and that's using debt service, but it's using the difference between the 2019 payments and the 2020 payments of $66,269 to reach a total of $3,302,862 and a mill rate of $7.71. So hopefully that kind of gives you a picture of what the mill rate would be for each one of those different scenarios. Along with this, if you look to the third column over where it says over and under levy, when you look at your levy options and you look at what we need based on budgeted numbers or the budget presentations we've had, you can see where it falls in relation to the levy option. If we use the levy option of $3,351,133, which is the allowable levy plus the $114,540 that we approved by resolution last Tuesday night, we would be under the levy by $14,483. If we look at from the budget our pre-TIF levy of $3,000,003 and the levy option for the levy limit from the levy limit worksheet plus the rescinded tax amount, the $3,000,002, you can see that we're over our levy limit by $100,057. And then finally the third line, if you look at this, the budgeted $3.3 million, based on the budgets I should say, the levy option of using the difference in the debt service payments between 19 and 20, the $3,000,003, you can see that we're over the levy limit by $33,788 for the 2%
I take it it's an either or. You either use the allowable, you either use the 114 we approved or the debt service, but not both.
Correct.
And this is $7,000 approximately more than we were presented last week. The levy amount, the budget pre-TIF levy, that was 3,329. This is 3,336. 26, is that based upon, I assume we spent in quotes, $7,000 on Thursday night?
Yeah, we had the 3,300 for Thursday night, and Kim Lane brought up the extra $3,000
For the
for the
salary.
rate, so that would be
So-
basically what the difference
Okay,
is.
thank you.
So the same principle flows through each one of the scenarios, with the 2% with recycling, without recycling. You can see the impact that taking recycling out of the general fund has on the over and under the levy amounts. Any questions so far?
On the, can you tell me the difference again between assessed mill rate and equalized mill rate?
Equalized is the state assuming that we're at 100%. And the assessed, we're at 90.04.
Okay, and then, as a point of reference, looks like last year's pre-tip was $7.54, and then your options are here, a little more on some of them. What does, so based off of, excuse me, my tax bill, for example, is based off of the assessed mill rate, correct? Okay, thanks.
And last year, just as an FYI, the difference between equalized and the assessed values in the city were less than 3% apart from each other. This year we're 10. So there's a big, that's why we have such a big gap between, last year, if you look at the assessed versus equalized, it's not even 30 cents difference. But if you look at where we are this year, it's a significant difference. It's 80 cents in some cases or more. So I think it's just the fact that we have such a big gap between where we are in an assessed value and where the equalized value is.
To be clear though, Kim, when we make a decision on which one of these, the mill rate that we're picking is for the assessed value, not the equalized value,
That is
because we're not out to that full, equalized, because we're that far behind. That's where we could be, but we can't make it there this year.
Correct. And that's another reason why having the revaluation, the market revaluation next year is really important. And that is in the budget for next year.
And then when I'm seeing these scenarios where we're over under the levy, when you're under the levy, what does that mean?
You could.
What would you do with that 14,000 or 26,000? Like, is that more money you have to spend, or is that money saved?
It's money, well, it's both, in the sense that if you don't want to use that money, you aren't required to use it. So in a sense, you are kind of saving that. But on the flip side, if you needed it, say, to add to a project or something, you'd have the capacity to do that.
I'm not sure who's first. You can also pick it up next year, right? Kind of like what we're doing with that 114, if you leave some at the table or a portion of it.
The percentage of it, yeah.
Well, would it, or would it be, is it last in, first out, or, do they say you didn't use your whole 114, but that whole 114 is gone, or do they let you recount it each year?
What, the way it is right now, it's a rolling 5-year period. So the 2014 number that we're taking advantage of this year would, if we didn't use it, would basically roll in next year, and they would look at 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. And we really use, when you look at what we've used over the course of these years, we really used 100% of our levy. So there really isn't going to be a lot of unused or allowable levy increases that can come in for the next few years. There is one caveat to all of this, and that's something that I just learned very, very recently from Greg Johnson, and that is that the state of Wisconsin is changing the playing field on levy limits and levy limits allowable increases. state is saying is that instead of, okay, right now, the way Ellers taught it was you looked at your general obligation debt balance, principal balance, as of 2019 and 2018. And if you did not increase your general obligation bond principal balance between 18 and 19, you were eligible to take the $114,540 without any problem. The state has now changed it to say 19 and 20. And they did it literally within the last month. Greg got hold of us and let us know. He also said go ahead and approve the resolution because they're not the only ones fighting it because it impacts every community that wants to use their allowable increases. So right now, it just puts everybody in bad place.
In what manner? By changing it, it has what effect? As of today, as of a week ago, we thought we had 114. You're learning this new information indicates we now have X. What is X?
Well, what Greg has said is that we can still use the 114,540. But what would probably happen is that the Department of Revenue would come back to us in 2020 and make us amend our levy limit worksheet. The good thing about it is, and this is another blessing in a way, that we haven't been using the debt service levy back and forth, is that if they would come back and say, you need to amend this, Greg said you merely list the 114,540 on the debt service levy line because you can use up to that $780-some thousand levy that we're going to make to fill that gap. So that's where we would be. So we could still use the 114,540. It's just frustrating.
Then I have another question. To answer Alder Traxler's question, theoretically, would it behoove us to, under scenario 1, tap, in essence, that levy, the 14,483, and put it in a contingency account? So potentially a decision could be made to levy to our max and tap the entire 114 and put an additional 1443 in a contingency or rainy day fund. It would affect the mill rate, obviously, but we wouldn't have to. The other source is undesignated fund balance if an emergency came up.
And then on the flip side to my original question, when we're over the limit, say with scenario 1, we're over by 100,000, that's when you have to go back and start cutting things.
And know that I do have a meeting scheduled with department heads, just to go through what we're talking about tonight, should there be any decisions made so that we can work on it collaboratively.
Where do you find $100,000?
I don't mean to smile, but last year we put the budget together, we were $455,000 between levy limit and we worked it out and I worked it out, well, we worked it out and made it work. I think that $100,000 is a large sum of money and it's nothing to sneeze at or easy to find. But, some of the things that come to mind is could I look at the gateway funds and see if I couldn't potentially use a little bit more in 2020 to help buy down the debt service levy. I couldn't use a whole lot because we really want to keep that in place till 2023 when the payment that we're making to Interpac actually goes away. But,
$66,269 increase in debt payments for this year. And I'm kind of looking at the debt service here and can't really figure out, is that just organically a spike this year that's coming up, or is that, because we haven't bonded yet,
Right.
but that wouldn't come due till 2021, our first payment, correct? So I'm just trying to see where that increase is, because we'd be relying on including that into our, well, we wouldn't be using it in our worksheet, but if we needed to document, we'd have to cover the 114 with debt instead of the other amount.
So then it would be 66 plus the 114 if we did that.
Okay.
But the 66 is just the difference between last year's mill rate and this coming year's mill rate.
Is the actual, what I'm trying to look at is the actual debt payments, so is that identified in the,
Yeah, it's on the first page of the debt service budget, which is page 3, is Fund 300. This year we're levying roughly 714,000. Next year we'll be levying 780,
oh, okay.
and that's where that 66 comes from.
Do you know roughly where that, I mean, did you know that spike was there last year? Is that something that we did this year that's creating that?
I knew it was there because
Okay.
I've got it forecasted all the way through when all the bonds in.
Okay.
It's just, some of the new debt that's coming on and how things are structured, some come on, some are coming on. Ellers does a nice job of trying to keep the payments fairly level. We don't get into the peaks and valleys, so to speak. So yeah, that's just the difference between the
So-
different years.
What if we bond next year, then in spring, what we're gonna try to have Greg do is kind of craft those first 3 or 4 years to make sure there's never a decrease, always a slight increase, correct, in our debt levy,
What I would
if we wanna use it in our budget, sorry.
Yeah, what I would probably recommend for your borrowing next year is to unload all of your bonds and the I should say the revenue bond for the sewer utility. Just because that will give you the ability, if you can get past 2023, I hate to say it, but 2023 is really critical for the city for a couple of different reasons. One, our agreement with Actuant ends, so last year we have to make a payment to them. And right now, our agreement is that we pay everything over $50,000 in taxes, we refund back to them. So their tax bill is a couple $100,000 or more a year. We are paying that back. And actually, it's a good thing. We saved 200-300 jobs. We've got a great facility in the city right now. The other really positive thing, though, is TIF 3 will retire. And that means all of the value from TIF 3 will be available to levy. Right now, it's rolled into that TIF calculation, and we can't use it to levy our general expenses against. But in 2023, when that rolls back on, that's gonna be a huge benefit to the city. So, that's why I'm saying is, if we're going to structure, when we look ahead, we really need to be conscious of the fact that we've got kind of that mark to work towards. Even if we capitalize interest for the first year, potentially maybe for the bill or the bond, either one, it still gives us the ability to kind of like Mayor Tom said, kind of keep those payments relatively steady. So that's my 2 cents and my advice about borrowing and how I'd like to see the bond structure.
Okay.
I'm just, is there any particular area that you want me to answer questions on? Or take questions back to department finance or anything, anywhere that can help.
Let me ask you this question, the council first, and maybe you can help. Does it, before we start digging into things, do we need to pick a scenario which is favorable first, or do we need to figure out if there are changes on the other side that may affect the four scenarios?
You know, I would, this is just my recommendation is I would get your budget put together, because every time you make a change, all four of these scenarios change. So if we can get to a point where we're comfortable with what's actually budgeted for the various funds that impact the levy, then I think we could move forward and you'd have a much better picture of what your ultimate, your end mill rate would look like. And that would give you, like you said, Andy, you could better see what the scenarios look like.
Okay. Mike?
Just kind of looking at the first couple of cover pages, I feel like I want to start working in one of the four directions that are being provided us, and I feel like looking at scenario number 2, which would be 2% without recycling in the general fund, is pretty close. It's actually be 2 cents under the 2019 mill rate. So that's 78,776. Is that correct, Jim? Pre-TIF levy.
Well, last year's was 754, so we would have to,
That actually on this page, that's 2018, and this one shows 778 for the 2019. Or no,
2019 tax bill.
okay, so that's okay. That's the one we're working on now. So 754 was the same for the last 2 years. Okay. But we were at 812 in 2016. Over 8. That's kind of the general direction I want to wander in, because I feel like it's still somewhat consistent with, well, there's a slight increase, but it's still under $8. But I think getting the recycling out from the general fund is probably a good step for us. We're looking to do a project down there in the next couple of years as well. That gives us more room within the levy. That's just my general direction. I feel like we need to pick one of these, kind of head in that direction, and then we can start looking at more of the minutia of the budget if we need to get to a certain number.
Okay, so, you know, my gut feeling was scenario 2, but I guess we can narrow this down right away. Are we looking at 3% increase or 2% increase? Because I think that'll eliminate 2 of the options right away. I don't know if anybody has an opinion on that yet. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
The reason I'm falling to 2% versus 3% is I think that 2% is basically what we've done in recent years, and I think having the money in the budget to allow for wage adjustments next year or do a wage study is, at least we have something substantial there with the new administrator, as opposed to that 1 extra percent because we're levying it. Look at the mill rate, the correlated mill rate, I guess, is that what you want to go that high for 3% or not. I just kind of felt like the 2% with the recycling in the general fund is kind of more moderate. Still going to be a slight increase, but it's still including a lot of the things that we had talked about.
my opinion would also be 2%, and without recycling in the general fund. That when I read this originally, that was where my mind went, and I have seen nothing that has changed that at this point. So. Anyone else?
I'll agree. The mayor has talked about an overall wage study, and I think that would give us flexibility to make adjustments as needed and follow
All right, now that we have a scenario 2, sounds like we should work towards that and see where that takes us. And at this point, I know we may have some questions on some specific budget funds. I don't know if you guys want to start somewhere. Yes. They're aware. All right, it's okay. I saw that too, and I was like,
We kept hearing the buzzer, so we couldn't see
It
what
was-
was coming in.
actually happened the last time we were here on Monday too. I saw. All right. Ed, I know you probably have some questions. You want to kick it off, or do you want to?
First pages of the budget summary and go forward either way.
I'll try to answer the questions as we go along. I think it's a good idea to start with 100 and just work through the book.
Anybody else have any questions before I start? Maybe we're done.
Well, I guess with the information that Kim gave about the 114,000, I mean, where are we at on that? I mean, are we thinking I mean, we did do the resolution that gives us the option to do it. Doesn't mean we're locked into it. So I guess we need to see where we're at with. I mean, if we have an $88,000 gap versus we're under the levy by 26,000, under the yeah.
More, maybe we get more road work, or we have to pay more for the study, or we more costs with the administrative search, or, I mean, there's so many things that can come up. That's just this.
I think we should be using the allowable levy if we can. I think it's base building. It's not gonna just affect us this year, it's gonna affect us next year, it will be there. Tying this to the roadmap project, we're not talking about that right now, but that's a significant step in the right direction for future projects, is to do some base building with our levy. That's why.
Ed?
I agreed with Kim. I think we should work through the budget, work through the numbers, and then come back and see at the end of the night or whatever where we're at, and maybe that 11,000 gap or whatever $14,000 gap turns into a $50,000 gap, and we decide, you know what, that's too much to add to contingency. I would like to see the contingency fund be bolstered if possible. I think time and again in the course of the year we've been like, things have come along, we're like, where are we going to find the money? However, Kim's suggestion of let's go through the individual accounts and then at the end see where that is. Maybe we don't add it all to contingency, but rather than deciding that now, we'll look at the budget first.
But just to be clear though, if we had consensus that we were gonna do scenario 2% increase without recycling in the general fund.
Yeah, that's what I heard. Consensus with.
But which version of that? If we did the allowable levy increase of the 114 would mean if we have consensus there that we're $26,480 under the levy limit at this point. Okay. And that's your approach we're taking.
Correct. And I misspoke when I said 14. I was looking at the column. That's
Okay.
scenario 1.
Just wanted to be clear. Thanks, Ed.
Oh, I had something I was gonna say, but now I forgot what it was. Okay.
Any questions for the revenues in general fund? Every pages 1 through 4.
street opening and other permits. We only spent, or only received, 4,500 this year.
That's what,
Contemplate.
that's based on, taking the dollar amount that we received through September, dividing it by nine, analyzing it out.
Okay. We don't think that's a trend, that next year is too optimistic? This year is a one-year aberration?
I think that they have a good feel for the number of openings that they have in the streets each year. And it also includes other permits like sidewalk and other things that public works would charge people permit fees for. You know, when I look at the history back, we've been 9,000 or greater since 2015.
Yeah, but
If you're confident that number's realistic, it's fine.
I really don't have much to go on with that, it's really the annual,
Okay, very good. It's potentially a one-year aberration. Very good. Turning to page 3. Unless anybody has anything before then.
where was the county road aid?
That's in the state aid portion, it's the second group after the taxes. Total government aids and payments. Second one from the bottom, right above the reimbursement.
County, okay.
Before we move on from that, I guess what I don't know that we ever really got a good understanding. If we're gonna maximize that county road aid program, how much can we put into that and get a match? Cause I think we get like a 50%
It's 90,
benefit.
I think it's the 97.9, I think we did 100% this year.
That's an odd number.
I know.
Why can't they go to 10 grand?
I don't know, you know, for the township, it's $16,893.82, so
Okay.
I don't know where they go.
I just wanted to make sure that we would, well, no, that's the amount
Yeah, we
that
pay.
comes in as a revenue?
Yeah, we pay that and then we get it back the following year as a revenue, as a reimbursement.
Okay,
So it's always delayed by a year.
okay, so do we have an expense
Yes, we do.
tied to that as well?
Yes.
Okay,
And what I did, is I split it out so you could see it separately from the regular street maintenance work. So you've actually got two lines for street work now. It's on page.
Sorry to take you on what?
15. No,
Okay.
it's no problem. On page 15, the top grouping of numbers is all for streets. The last line, streets county highway aid project, 9,700. I suppose I could make that 9,709. But I rounded it to 97.
Okay,
So that's in there. Besides the 75,000.
okay, thank you.
Page 3 at the bottom. Parks pavilion rental, 38,000. I would think that based upon increasing the rates that we did at the last meeting, that we could bump that number going forward and potentially give ourselves extra revenue. Potentially work with Amy Jo and reforecast. Granted, a lot of next year is probably booked using the current rates, but maybe it can go up a couple $1,000, I would think. Just my hunch. Because that number has been in there, has not changed since we changed the rates.
That's true.
Also, I didn't see anything in there for athletic fields rental, which maybe it appears in a different line, but
It's in the grouping immediately above.
oh, there it is. There it is.
Yep,
3,200.
3,200.
All right.
And I do track all of Amy's rentals, both resident and non-resident. So I could take a look at that with her, and we could look at, like you said, maybe a couple thousand.
Right, next year is fairly well booked already, but there may be some money at available rentals. Turn to the next page. Transfer from cable commission. In their their documents or in the prior budget worksheet, it was 32,134. I don't know which number is correct. And then the next line below that, Tourism Commission, I believe had budgeted 11,000.
They haven't gotten the 2020 budget yet for tourism.
But isn't it 30% of the projected revenue?
It's actually based on the number of hours that cable coordinator actually works.
This is revenue from Tourism Commission.
So what we do is, at the end of every pay period, we get a breakdown of how many hours she worked for tourism, how much for cable, how much for city, and then cable and tourism are charged back to that dollar amount. And I think Matt's gotta take the 2020 budget for tourism to you all yet, because I haven't gotten one from him. Alright, going into pages, let's say 5 through general government, which would take us 5 through 8. Chapel Street Water Tower is shown again there for 2020. Like I said earlier, will be to be determined by council how that is dispersed. But it's there at least as a placeholder at this point in time.
Kim, you had mentioned earlier that should there be a gap, you would look at using the undesignated fund balance to fill that hole.
Yes.
How much is in there now? Approximately, don't need dollars, exact dollars.
I think beginning the year will be about 843,000 in the undesignated fund balance after the 2020 budget is over, or the 2019 budget is over. And that's taking into account some of the unexpected expenditures that we had this year. That's my best guesstimation at this moment in time.
How much is left in the contingency fund?
The actual expense line, I wanna say about 11,000.
Okay. That was a question I had earlier that I couldn't remember. Ed, go ahead.
Turn to elections. Page 6. You contemplate spending between September 30th and the end of the year an additional $3,200 in election expenses. Or booking an additional $3,200 in election expenses. Because we haven't had an election since April, and I'm just curious, are we not booking our expenses timely, or there would be theoretically more money available for carryover?
I know on the wages side, Pat and I talked, there's training that she's going to hold for the election workers before the end of the year. And so that's why we left that number at the about the $4,000 mark. In the support expenses and programming line, I know we showed 100% of that being spent, and I know there was a reason for that. I had it recall off the top of my head.
listed. I thought that was referencing the 5,200 number.
It actually is true, if it's just a description that we're using, because that line actually kind of changed a little bit from what it had been previously. I think one of the things when Pat and I sat down is, there was a real blend of expenses between repair, maintenance, support, expense, and programming going on. We didn't really have a clear picture of what repair and maintenance actually was versus what the support expenses and programming were. And what was happening is, some of those were kind of going back and forth. And so what we did is we said repair and maintenance is really that, it's the light bulbs, it's the, if a voting booth breaks down or something happens, that was what that money is for. But then the support expenses and programming is purely everything that has to do with the voting machines, the ballots, the, support from Columbia County, and the potential to possibly rent a machine for the presidential election. So that's what that is.
It's $280, but I mean, we're gonna do more printing and advertising between now and the end of the year. These numbers, in a year with 2 elections, and only one of which was held in April, the fact that we spent $7,700 seems a little high, and then 23,000 next year, there's potentially 4 next year. Just,
I'm not sure, I know that there's a, Pat, you'll have to just help me, because I don't remember, there's a notice E, I believe, that has to come out, and another notice. One of them will be saying that the city of Columbus has X positions open, and that people can apply or, come in and, take out papers. Thank you, I was struggling with that. And then there's other notices that come out as far as, where you get your absentee ballots and things like that. But I think the big one is probably the notice for the positions that are going to be open here.
While we're on page 6, the administrator salary seems a little off. Yeah.
Actually, what that is, when we went through those numbers earlier, in contingency holds any potential difference for salary for the administrator. And what this really represents is just the assumption that it would be 9 full days. So it's not reflecting a full year, assuming that we aren't gonna have an administrator on the ground January 1st. So that's why it's a little lower.
Okay. Thanks.
I believe that line was around 60,000. There's a 67 or 60. I forgot. I lost that page.
$59,167.
Was the contingency?
No, that was what was budgeted this year for the administrator's position.
No, I know. I'm talking about the contingency that you just mentioned. You said on the
We
previous
have
page.
31,000 in contingency right now for the administrator's process, interim, and a potential tweak in salary. What's based here is the number that we talked about in closed session. Should say. Right, it is spread out. Right, it's, the administrator's wages are actually in the general fund, in the sewer utility, both TIF districts and the EMS district. Correct. Yes.
Going to page 8. City Hall telephone is jumping to 5,600.
Our system that we have now is the contract with AT&T expires in April, so we know we're gonna see, we've seen years of lower budget. We're getting some numbers in now, but we're gonna see that, we will see that number increase. Yep.
passion, but I'm not sure in this budget environment that ThinkPads for the council is necessarily a wise expense. I don't know if these numbers contemplate supplies going down based upon less paper as was contemplated or not, but I for one am not necessarily in support of a laptop or a ThinkPad for the council at this point unless it's demonstrated there'd be a corresponding savings elsewhere.
What line is that in?
And I know, we have funds, you know, that we have designated there, or that was where the thought was to put for the laptops. But I think we also have to still be real cognizant of a number in there just for general city hall repair.
That would be fine. I just, to the extent that that number is contemplating laptop slash
Yes,
ThinkPads
yeah.
for the council, I see, you know, the expenses, the supplies number up above is going from 6,500 to 9,000. So if there's contemplated less paper and toner for printing for the council, it's not reflected there.
One item that we did change this year, our printing and supplies always was running under building repair and maintenance, and we have that now designated in the supplies fund. So that'll be the switch up this having our first full year on that as well.
Just a comment, Ed, I don't know that the city's going to be able to make a leap in 1 year to get all of us off of our paper and onto technology, but I do support looking at that further. I don't know what $5,000 represents as far as what type of a device that is when you figure in security, but I think having someone like OnTech here can definitely help us with that. I don't know if it's a laptop, I don't know if it's replacing this with a more interactive screen, but I would like to have something in the budget, even if we can get a few people on the council to do that. I think it's significant savings in printing costs and time to print it as well. But I'd like to have a placeholder there to at least explore and look at it the following year. We're $26,000 under levy right now, and I'm glad we're making cuts. Maybe there's another project out there we can get done, but I'd like to try to keep something as a placeholder there. Maybe $2,500 or $2,000, if that's okay.
Whatever Caitlin thinks is appropriate. I just seen iPod or ThinkPads or whatever. The council, when we're potentially raising taxes, I think there are certain people that might have an objection to that. So.
All right.
I have. Oh.
Just a question for clarification. I know we've talked about the new squads, but Dennis, I see that's accounted for on page 10, to the tune of $86,410 for 2 new squads and the outfitting for them for the equipment. I'm not sure exactly where the funding is coming for that. I see the carryover, obviously, for the patrol wages, and then also the lieutenant's position and the health, vision, and dental insurance. Were those supposed to be applied to the purchase of that vehicle? So those amounts will be carried over into that line, into that $86,000. Okay, all right, just wanted clarification on that.
So the words carryover are missing from the comments column then? There's a sheet that indicates many of the carryovers. And does that sheet gather? Oh, very good. Because the carryovers are kind of inconsistent, how and when they appear.
And in the police department, because they were short-staffed, there's savings in.
I understand the reasoning. I'm saying on these budget documents, sometimes carryover appears and it's corresponding, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes they appear as a revenue item, and sometimes they don't. For consistency, how carryover is reflected on the worksheets.
All right, I do have a question. Page 10, patrol salary wages. Adopted budget 300,000 for 2019. Year an estimate 281. 2020 budget 310. Carryover from 2019 10,000. But so that's just you're carrying over 10,000 to this line. You're staying, or that 10,000 is going towards the police squad.
Squads.
So you're asking for $10,000 more in the budget.
But that's based on actual wages that we will be paying out
You could have carried $10,000 over
to offset the
to
wages.
offset the $10,000 in wages. Just seemed like a strange way to do it, I guess.
Yeah. I understand. And I think it goes back to probably a little better explanation.
Oh, go ahead.
On the patrol wages, where are we at staff-wise now? We're one short. We're not hiring one right now, hopefully.
Anything else in PD? Go ahead.
I feel like a couple years ago, when it came to this, we weren't budgeting for full staff, and I spoke up then. I think we're like $50,000 short that year. I think the intent always is to have a full staff the entire year, then you have to have that budget line right on. But I think that there can be a little bit of flexibility. I hate to do that with wages, but if there needs to be some adjustment at the end of the year, the good thing is we have a full staff. We know we have to pay all the wages and benefits. We can do that through a budget amendment, but I feel like this is an area where it always gets really squishy, and we're trying to budget for a full staff of 10. And if we lose someone halfway through the year, all of a sudden you've got all that unused funds. So I feel like this is kind of a flexible area where we can have good intentions, but if things get sticky, we can kind of adjust things here as needed kind of through the year too. That's just what I've seen.
I think just wanted to, I think they're active patrol officers.
One.
Anything else on PD? Fire department?
Page 11, crossing guard wages. I think we kind of had a real brief discussion about this, maybe at one of the budget meetings. This is something that I'd like to try to just get a little bit of more funding into, whether it's adding another possible crossing guard for the year, or looking at some additional training or meeting time for them. I know that most of these crossing guards are working half an hour in the morning, half an hour in the afternoon. But that's something I think where a little bit of money makes a big difference. You know, Katie, I think you had mentioned maybe Tower Drive or some area over there. I, did Dennis have any feedback for you on that or not?
He said that he would take it under advisement.
Okay. Dennis is looking for.
So just a question on that, do you know exactly how that works? But who surveys and tries to figure out where the best spots for the crossing guards are? Is that Dennis's responsibility or?
Yes.
So instead of him taking it under advisement, can't we direct him to investigate that? Or through the budget, or the resolution, or I don't know. Just, I'm curious.
I can just find out what the status is and get back to you.
Is that, if we wanna add another crossing guard, or, you know, we gotta adjust this budget line.
Mike, was there any feedback of that from the 2050? Anything specifically about that?
Safe routes to school doesn't exist any longer, but I just feel like this is an area that we can work with the police department on, whether it's additional people, whether it's operational supplies. I joked with some of the crossing guards that they should all have paintball guns to mark up the cars that don't abide by the laws, state laws. Maybe it's more signage, maybe it's better flashing signs, maybe it's GoPro cameras for the crossing guards to wear. I don't know, but I think that we need to have some better tools and resources for these people. I think it comes down to the budget. So.
I agree. I was at the corner of Park and Barnum, and it was in the middle of the road with the stop sign up. I'm stopped on this side, car just drove right through, and she was in the middle of the road with her stop sign up. Yeah, and it's very dangerous. I think there should be some consideration to some technology there. And look, people knew that our crossing guards were armed with cameras, that probably would treat them with more care.
I agree. That's why I wanted to bring it up right now. If there's something that wasn't in the budget, and that's something that I feel like we haven't really had much conversation about in past years, and I think a little bit would go a long way there.
See $26,000 that we could dip into if we need to. Ed?
$952 in unspent supplies in the final quarter here.
Another area would be under their part-time officer LTE line. They've got $1,500 in there. And, I even have to, I wanna look into what that 581 was for this year. Because to the best of my knowledge, we did not have a part-time officer.
Not on the 4th of July?
I think that's all done through mutual aid, so I'll find that out, but that might be somewhere else that we could look, that we could look here.
Jerry King was actually
Sure.
yeah, for the
So that would have come
Yeah.
through this and not through the crossing guard page.
Probably.
Okay.
Like maybe under the operating supplies, if they hadn't spent that by the end of the year, we could carry that over. They're estimating that they're going to spend a full $1,000. They only had $48 in activity, but if we carried that $1,000 over and doubled that by the $2,000, would give them some financial support if they wanted some technology there. That's a pretty small investment.
Jason?
We could also use some of that to offset some of the tech expenses that we incurred. I could talk with Dennis about that too, but either way, I think we could get that.
Do we want to put a placeholder in there for some potential technology?
I'd at least like to take that, the operating supplies and double that to 2,000, to carry the 1,000 over and then add another 1,000. To start. Across the board operating supplies.
Perhaps, just looking into, you know, the scenario like you described, Andy, looking into like maybe stop signs that actually light up or things that are gonna grab people's attention a little bit more.
Some of them have. The
I'm
one
not
by Cenex has a light up one. I don't know if that's the only one.
Yeah.
And out here, they, you know, remove the sign that's in the middle of the road, and it's, I wish they could keep it there, you know, even some type of flashing crosswalk to
Yeah.
make, good sense in some of these areas of the city. Slow traffic down.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Questions from the fire department then? Mike?
Under the ambulance contract, Kim, do we keep like a small residual amount in that fund?
Fund. So you can see there how it's broken out between all the different municipalities that are part of the EMS district. And then the second page kind of gives you a breakdown of how it's done based on population. So that was an area where I thought, if we're going to give money back and it's based on that percentage, we're almost 50% of that 40 cents. So I don't know in that EMS meeting if they had any hard and fast numbers as far as what that population numbers are for Lowell and Reeseville that they'd be serving. You know, is it just the villages proper or is it, not really sure. But that could lower our amount in the general fund then because we wouldn't be paying out as much or we'd be getting that refund.
Exactly, that's why I was asking where would that revenue go then if they refunded that at the end of 2020? Would it go into?
What I probably would do is create a revenue line right in our general fund so that we would recognize and be able to see it coming in.
Okay.
And then that revenue would be an offset to what we're spending through the expenditure line.
Okay. Thank you.
Fire department, anything else? Emergency management? Skip ahead to where you guys have questions.
I guess I have a question on Udi Dam. We've spent $244 through September 30th on maintenance. Contemplate spending the full 1,600. Would Zach be the person to ask if we contemplate spending another 1,350 remainder of the year on Udi Dam maintenance? Should she come to the mic or answer from that? Just clear.
So some of the funds to come out of here yet would be our dam inspection, which is done every other year. I don't know the price off of that to be exact, but as you, I'm not sure if it's in your notes or not, but at one point in my notes here I have looking to a safety cable, which was in past year's budgets. I have been advised against that cable, so that might be a small savings we would have there. But we also did incur some costs after the flooding in the beginning of October, along with that.
When I see a number, you know, that low through 3/4 of the year and then a big amount at the end, I'm curious, are expenses contemplated for the final quarter, or is that something that we can potentially harvest in a roll or reduce? So that's the reason for the questions.
Understandable.
Jack, I have a question while you're up. As far as repair and maintenance, that's just for the physical dam itself, not like the maintenance your crew does. Like if you gotta go and after the flood and start pulling out trees and garbage, that's coming out of your DPW budget or this part of the budget?
As far as wages go, that would be just out of DPW budget.
Okay,
for
all right, thank you.
Next page, page 14, the top half under garage equipment, base rental, it says 4,700 Bobcat program. The prior worksheet we worked off of, that number was 17,200. Can you explain why the reduction?
That was initially the homeowner's, down payment.
4,700 is a more accurate number.
Just one thing on the wages splits and things that you see in Public Works, they have a program called Time Care. They track everyone and what they do throughout the year. And then what we do is look at that and monitor it and make sure that, for instance, garage percentage stays within about where we have it budgeted. Some years we have to tweak it a little bit, but it's a good tool for us to be able to split those out. So like you asked about the dam work, that's based on hours that they're actually working at the dam. It's just not a fictitious, not fictitious is the word I want to use, but a guess number. It's really based on the percentage of time they actually spend on it. And that's why you could see expenses being incurred for snow and ice in June, but it's just based on the fact that over the course of the entire year, they spend, I'm just gonna use a percentage, 10% of their time doing snow and ice, and it's just split out at every year. So, I'm sorry.
Zach, while you're up on page 15 under streets, I'm noticing that you've got quite a reduction in the let's see, operating supplies and expenses seem to have been between 15 and 17, $18,000. Last year we budgeted 16. Activity through 9/30 is 11,000. Estimated to be 16,000. You're budgeting 12,800 for next year, which seems historically low. Is there some change there?
So what we did there is, in past years, we've taken the leftover funds in that account and purchased street signs. The state requires us to update our street signs so that they're the reflective ones. So I chose to actually just pull a portion of that out, kind of based on our past numbers, to show that we're actually doing that and that it's not just whatever leftover funds we have.
It still seems lower than it did.
If you add the 3,200 to the 12,800, you get the 16,000 that was budgeted this year. Is that how you did it?
Correct.
What other operating supplies and expenses do you pull from that account generally? Besides street signs?
I'd have to pull up my day-to-day budget to.
Anything associated with streets, I guess, that would be repair and maintenance, lights, controls, so I guess that's a pretty broad account. Okay. Thanks, Zach.
I have a question for you while you're up there. What line do you take your watering flowering baskets downtown out of? And are you going to continue to commit to doing that next year?
As far as any odds and ends, we shouldn't have spent. If we did spend anything, it was very marginally. It would have been fuel, really. So the rest would have been wages. I can't tell you exactly where those are pulled out of in here, but I can tell you that we did spend approximately $1,000 on that project this summer.
How many hours would you estimate you did?
Looking at the report that I had forwarded along to you, I want to say it was I want to say 40, but that might be a complete guess.
I only ask because you had mentioned previously that you have other things that we've been neglecting, like trees, and you're putting 40 hours of watering baskets downtown. Just wanted to know if that was something you're gonna continue to do and how you're gonna, manage that and then take on doing more tasks related to trees without.
Right.
You didn't get more people, so.
Right. So that was 90+% of that work is done by summer help, the watering the flowers. Obviously, putting the baskets up in the spring and taking them down in the fall is full-time work, full-time staff. So really, you're talking about 45 minutes in the morning for summer help before they get on the lawnmower, which a lot of days is okay because the other summer help are prepping it and you're kind of waiting for dew to burn off. But then again, that's something I'm happy to discuss with, and that's something, if we decide not to move forward with that, that's something we can definitely look into.
No, I'm just curious. I think whenever I saw the people watering, it never was your summer help. It was always the guy with the beard. I forget what his name was. Really long, great. He'd always be parked up at the top of my street when I was going to work, watering that basket. So, I was just curious. So you do plan on continuing to water those next year?
Yeah, I think so.
Have they been taken down?
Yes, they have.
Okay. Thanks. That's all I have.
Can you explain the sidewalks number? I don't understand the carry from in total 26,000. I don't understand that line.
What page are you on?
Page 15, sidewalks, it's in the upper block, it's the third line up from the bottom of the upper block. There's a number of 33,000. Carry from 2019, 13,000. Total 2020, 26,000. I don't know how to make those numbers work.
I gotta defer to Kim on this. I don't think that's.
I think this was one of the ones that was kind of in flux because we weren't sure how much the company that we were working with could get done before year end. So, at one point, I think Ed had asked to be updated to reflect the fact that we do expect them to have some work done before the end of the year.
Correct. I can tell you that. So initially we had the $20,000 there, and I've confirmed 6,500 and some change of work to be done in 2019 pending the weather.
Which would then reduce the 2019 number from 14 down to that 6,500. And that's then how you get the 13 carryover. Very good. But 13 carryover plus 26 is 39 in my math. So
We had actually.
really don't understand how that line is
Well,
working.
it was originally 20,000, we thought we would be spending 14. Adding the 6,000 unspent to the 20,000 budget for 2020 was the 26,000. What I should have done, when we changed that to 13,000 carryover was total 2020 budget should be 33, so we've got the 13 plus the 20.
And the last line on that page, the tractor rent, the snow and ice truck equipment rental, it's now 20,500. I thought our worksheet, I thought it was 8,000. Is the note that I wrote. I don't know if that's accurate.
I think Zach can speak to that. What he was talking about was not renting the tractor, but actually retrofitting the end loader so that we would have to rent it.
So what I'm looking at there is some options that we can stop renting. Right now we're renting the tractor for $8,000 a year. For roughly 30, we could retrofit we could buy some equipment to use the end loader instead of renting that tractor. We just bought a brand new end loader. There's no reason we shouldn't be using it at every chance we got.
So for an additional 20, we can save 8 in the future years. So this line will go down.
Correct.
Since you're here, Zach, I feel like going through the budget, getting ready for next year, you do a great job in your department of coding all your tasks the way that you do, so you can track what the annual cost is. I know in some of the DPW reports that we get in our packets, you've actually broken out the time and the estimates for helping water the baskets, putting up the downtown amenities that came in this year. I do think it would be nice to have that tracked in the budget, maybe just under, community partnership, so you can start tracking that. I do think it's something that the city maybe invisibly participates in. Well, while there's a lot of fundraising and support that happens, but to kind of give us a better idea of the cost that comes from the taxpayers to help support these types of things.
Sure.
I would leave it up to you and Carolyn on what you call it and where you fit it in, but I think if you've got that card and you can track that for a full year, that would definitely help
Yeah,
us.
we can definitely do that.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate that. I kind of put a bow on what I was trying to get at there.
I had seen some of it in the reports, and I remember we kind of asked for that we wanted that tracked. Maybe it was kind of unofficially, but not through the budget, so it's just good to have it here with the budget.
And if you would like, I can submit the flower report and my director's report on next Tuesday.
Excellent.
Thanks, Zach. Okay. More questions? for Zach and DPW?
I guess page 17, recycling center, the last line, recycling center disposal of yard waste brush, only contemplate spending 5,500 of 8,000. Does that money carry over anywhere?
I do think we will be able to carry that money over. We have, in the past, it sounds like they've ground material twice a year. We're gonna get away with just doing it once this year. So once we get that final bill on that, we'll have a better idea of what's left there.
So theoretically, there's 2,500 that can be applied elsewhere, thus reducing the levy amount by $2,500. Is that accurate?
Granted, that's estimate that $5,500 will be our bill.
Thank you.
Right.
Right now, we're 18 to 21.
Questions on senior center?
Just note I did clarify the repair and maintenance and added the 3,000 that Kim was talking about from our discussion the other night. Because the flooring is the 13.5, the 3,000 was actually for everything over and above the floor.
Okay. Recreation? Is this, Kim, does this budget recognize us potentially switching to ActiveNet then, or, I'm sorry, Civic Rec?
There's 2,000. That says possible new program, civic. So there is a notation in there. That is a decision that is kind of on the periphery that the council will have to make yet.
Okay. And that's, we moved that forward to the next regular council meeting, didn't we?
I listened to the meeting and it sounded like there was support for it, but also there was support to get the reimbursement from ActiveNet as a way to help offset that purchase as well.
I think we recognize that there could be some money coming back.
Right.
I don't
yes.
think it was in either or. I think it was.
Right. But I mean, if we got the money in 2020, it would help offset the cost of the flooring.
You're anticipating in the budget that money coming?
I haven't done anything yet because you haven't approved it yet.
So what changes will I see if this is approved on Tuesday? Next
Well,
Tuesday?
if it's approved, I've already worked with, because I know that we were pretty darn close to our levy limits, that if they wanted the program to move forward, could they find funds within their budget to actually afford installing it and then making that first year, support payment in. So, if we approve it, there wouldn't really be any changes specifically to the dollars that we levy, but there would be some changes to specific lines within the budget, both in the aquatic center and in the general fund. But ultimately, the total cost would be taken care of.
And then it could also be spread out through DPW and all that. Okay.
I was just wondering if ActiveNet came with any like hardware replacement needs that need to be accounted for aside from just like software. Card readers, things like that. I don't know if you. Okay. Okay. And is that included in here somewhere?
I think we just needed clarification going forward whether this was a budget item or this was an item for the next council meeting.
I think, yeah, I don't know what the motion is going to be at the next council meeting, and I fully support looking at Civic Rec. I think it works with our existing website. I think there's a lot of added benefit for the community, but I also believe we need to take care of the mess that we have as ActiveNet right now. No offense to them. But if there's money at the table there, we're probably going to need to spend some money with our city attorney. I think we need to equip Amy Jo with some teeth, and we need to finally get to a resolution. I know I talked to Amy Jo, and they switched her contact person there, and she's not getting returned emails or phone calls. That needs to end. Because all the data that's in ActiveNet, that's what the big chunk is for Civic Rec, is they're going to take all that data and have to pull it over. So I think we kind of need to deal with them both at once, so to speak, in that changeover. So there could be additional expenses, legal expenses, or other things that we're going to have to deal with, and then maybe some infrastructural things like card readers, etc. I think Amy Jo's looking at trying to go to different devices at the pool as opposed to having desktop computers for the point of sale programs and things like that. So I think there's still some unknowns out there. I like the product, but I think we need to, we kind of need to run these both in tandem. We need to make sure ActiveNet is done, or can we get out of ActiveNet? I don't know. I haven't read the contract. Can we simply just decide that we're going to merge everything over to a new system halfway through the year legally? I don't know that yet. That's where I think attorneys need to get involved. So I'm happy to go in that direction, but I don't know exactly what we need to promise and to who until we've got all this stuff kind of laid out and documented. So
Recreation questions?
All right, fine, I'll ask one. Are some of these unspent funds, well, I guess the estimate for the year is over the budget amount, so there's not necessarily anything available. I was looking at recreation, girls basketball, we budgeted $3,500, contemplate spending $1,200. That's $2,300. However, on the estimate of year end, we're $5,000 over what we budgeted, so it just works out. There would be no carryover.
Good job, Ed. Go ahead, Mike.
before we move on from recreation, I wanted to talk a little bit about spring and fall soccer. I know when you start looking at the numbers, they're kind of all over the board. there's been a lot of changes in local soccer the last couple of years. I talked to Amy Jo a little bit about this because obviously she went over budget this year, but I think the hard thing to budget for is anticipating the number of kids she's going to have in each program and how many classes are needed for each different age group and how much time we're going to need to have the coaches there for that. So I know you've got more in the budget. You got $1,500 more in the budget than you asked for last year. Amy Jo, do you think that's going to cover it, or? To help offset. The other thing that I realized as well, talking to Amy Jo about this, is when she's enrolling kids in these programs, there's the field use agreement that goes along with different leagues, etc., which is a per person participation fee of $5. I think that may be changing this next year, but that doesn't always go directly back to this line to help offset that. It's going through the field use agreement, which is through the Department of Public Works. So there's revenue being collected and then offsetting the maintenance on the field. So I think it's just very hard to predict how many kids are going to want to sign up twice a year, and then how many classes you ultimately need to have. So I just wanted to be sure that we had a pretty healthy mark there, 10,000. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else on that? All right. Parks and athletic fields.
There might be a short amount in that there's an $8,000 that was put aside for council that they asked to show improvements. Unfortunately, about 2 weeks before we got this flooding here this fall, that money was spent to do that work on field improvements and dirt work. So a lot of that was washed away, and it was not enough work to file insurance claims. So we're kind of in a rock and hard spot with that at the moment.
Did the county do the project yet down there?
They have not.
The park? Are they going to be able to do it now?
I haven't heard from them, but I'm really starting to think that might not be the case. You know, when I talked to him last week, he was out, and they're still trying to put down asphalt. So between that and plowing streets, I just think we're probably the bottom of their list. And so I haven't been told no yet, but I'm not holding my breath on it.
Is that a project that can be done over the winter, or does it have to be done in the fall?
You know, I don't know. I would think it's got to be a warmer time, but I don't know that to be 100% true.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a good point, Mike.
Yeah, so that one's really in limbo at the moment.
The ground is freezing.
Yeah.
Ed? Yeah.
I see in parts there's playground expenses of 5,000. That wasn't in the worksheet. That was added sometime after.
That's for mulch.
Okay, very good. It wasn't in our worksheet that we worked off of in prior meetings.
Was that taken out of other budget lines in the past? Mulch?
They haven't really done full-scale mulch replacement, so what they wanna get, at least when we have talk, is start a regular cycle of replacing mulch.
From my understanding, there's quite the requirements for the mulch in playground. And maybe have been kind of falling behind on it a little bit. And instead of every 5 years spending X dollars to replace all the parks, it seems like we'd be a little better off if we could just put a steady amount in there to do a park every year, whatever it was, instead of spiking every few years. Makes sense.
Parks and Athletic Field, more questions?
Yeah, I missed this under building repairs and maintenance. 22,300 budgeted for next year. 30,000 budgeted for this year. Is there specific projects that are coming out of there that you anticipate?
Yep, so that will be the staircase that was not completed this year in the budget as well. So my hope is to get both staircases done for this next year. To answer that question.
Which staircases?
Sorry, at the pavilion, at the fireman's pavilion.
That's 2 lines below.
Oh,
pavilion
I'm sorry.
expenses.
You're correct. That one is for painting. We're hoping to get some painting projects done around the park. The block bathrooms, the Boy Scout Lodge, Kiwanis block bathrooms. Need some quotes on getting some of that work done.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? National Services? Yes. What?
It's pretty much all associated with Rupert and Elke. Okay. Outside of their normal task orders. Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Next up, we have CDA Fund 205. Any questions there?
Yes, I have a question.
Go ahead.
The revenue line contribution from room tax fund, it says 12,750. Is that the number that comes from the room tax fund?
30% of what we anticipate.
And so therefore,
I think Matt left it the same as this year, just to make it simple.
okay, well, in the room tax fund, when we get there, it's budgeted at 14,145. Contribution to economic development. So, I'm just curious why they don't match.
Benefit.
Actually, you could change probably CDA to match 14. Reduce the 30,000 spending. We contribute 30,000 from the general fund.
Top
From
line.
the city, the very first one, so we could reduce that slightly, difference between 14,145 and 12,750.
Or I would urge the council, when Matt was here last week, we contemplated, or at least I advocated that he boost his training and education budget,
So we could.
as well as potentially take a look at funding some of the facade grant program if we're interested in that. To me, I thought he talked about a contribution toward this business development luncheon, that it wouldn't $3,000 would be a pretty nice luncheon. And I'm wondering if we can take a couple thousand out of that, or 1,000 out of that, as well as this room tax fund money, and potentially bolster some of the other items items I just mentioned.
I believe in the past, the most that we've spent really for those business appreciation was around 750. So I think that's a good point.
All right, so we can either reduce the city contribution, bolster his education and travel, and/or take a look at bolstering the facade grant program are three areas that come to mind.
Two questions about the CDA, Kim. Shows a $5,000 contribution from Water and Light. Has that been reviewed by the Water and Light Commission to verify?
Matt was going to, Michelle provided a letter to Matt
Okay.
that he needed to complete and bring back to Water and Light.
Okay.
I'm not sure if I would have to ask him if he's done that.
Okay. And have we received that contribution this year?
No,
We have not. Okay.
and that's what Matt needs to do is go down and actually schedule a meeting in front of Water and Light, present that letter.
Okay. The other question, and I believe that Matt may have mentioned this before, is so the Tourism Commission receives 70% of all room tax by statute. That has to go to the Tourism Commission. The residual 30%, I believe, is being channeled through this room tax fund line in the CDA. Is that correct? Any of that 30%, is that going directly into the CDA? Okay, so that can vary. That's where I think Kim's, we can take the levy down by allowing that fund to build up within the CDA. Does the fund balance stay within the
It's all
CDA
within the city.
under the savings account? Okay.
Savings of the local government investment, wherever they earn the best amount of interest.
Okay.
I was just pointing out that I didn't think the numbers matched. Trying to figure out which number was the right one.
Yeah, I think that it is wise though that if we want to, we want to keep our levy within reach, I guess, or adjust that a little bit to start spending the savings a little bit to try to reduce that levied amount. We're just going to continue to build a savings account for room tax versus taxing for something. So, okay, thank you.
Can I ask you one more question, Ken? I wrote down education, mileage training, facade grant. And I thought you mentioned one other item. I'm not
Or
sure.
reduce the levy contribution.
Thank you. That's, just wanted to make sure I got it down.
And it was also it was with the corrected room tax fund number, as well as potentially reducing the amount on the luncheon from 3,000.
Anything else on CDA? Okay. Questions on library?
That we don't have much we can do because that's governed by the library board statutorily. So the biggest thing the only thing really that we have control over, as far as monetary, is the subsidy that we provide them each year. And that's for 2020 is $284,407.
Up $4,400 from last year's budget and estimated year end of this year.
I guess I do have a question on that. We pay the Rotary dues for the library director. Is that going to continue, or is the library board itself?
Library board itself decides on
Okay.
rules.
Very good.
Okay.
I
Aquatic
just-
Center?
Can I just
Oh,
ask
yes.
quickly, I missed at the last, because it wasn't here, what was the raise that was decided upon for the library? 3%. 3%.
Nope, no problem. Aquatic Center. Any update on the leak? It's not leaking now, it's frozen, so. dollars on aquatic center. Catch up. Good. Alright, room tax fund. Question about expenses line, website domain and support, there's nothing budgeted there? Do we not have that?
This, now it flows through the CDA tourism and general fund.
Oh, right,
kinda
sorry,
split up.
wrong, okay, sorry, I was putting room tax and tourism as the same thing, and I know they're not. Sorry about that. Alright. Cable, oh, Mike.
Is there anything in this Fund 220 then that represents the total fund balance that hasn't been budgeted, or is that gonna be in CDA then?
Actually, the room tax does have a small fund balance, but it's literally just hundreds of dollars because it acts as a conduit for when room tax dollars come in. And then the same day we get them, we literally just transfer them into the two other funds. So there might be like, I'm looking at $2 in interest. I mean, it's a very small fund balance.
Okay, and then as far as the room tax payments, activity 930, have you received the third quarter payment yet for? You haven't, so we've only got half a year in there essentially.
When I called Val and talked, sorry, I called the gentleman from Super 8 last week, and they are transitioning to a new name and brand, and but he's assured me that the payment will be in sometime this week. And he has 60 days from the end of the quarter, so he has until November 30th.
Okay, thank you.
So new ownership, but it'll be the same management that you're aware of?
He just said they're transitioning, that's all he said, so I leave it to him.
Okay, thanks. Does Super 8 still have someone on the tourism commission, or was that taken by the other? Yeah, okay. Walk on up. Cable?
This is basically decided upon by the cable commission and it is funded by franchise fees.
I think myself and Alder Johnson have seen this a few times. Mike, you have a question?
Just on the fund balance, I'm assuming with the big project you did back there, you probably tapped into that fund balance for the upgraded broadcast system.
Indeed, we did.
Okay.
I believe, Lisa would have to correct me, but maybe around 60,000 ish.
I just noticed the difference between.
52, 72. I'm getting 75. Okay, 75,000.
Very good.
Getting hand signals from the cable coordinator. Thanks, Lisa.
That's the state of our technology. We have to get hand signals.
Indeed. Okay. Let's see. Trash and recycling.
With the decision to move recycling to the fee that's on the tax bill, we'll be at 175 for 2020. We would be at 165 with the new contracted amounts. And if you felt that was a little high, I could look at that reserve cash balance and
else would you do with the $44,000?
Well, I like to keep at least 1 month's payment on hand, so that 26,700 would be the payments going into 2020 per month, based on 1,917 units. So I want to keep at least $28,000 in there as a cushion, so that we have the money to make the payments.
So if you say you used 8 to 10,000, what would that?
It probably would drop us back to about the 165 mark.
Is there any reason why we need $10,000 more than what your conservative, one
Line item
payment?
would be, right. The only thing I could think of is if we did have some extenuating circumstances with flooding or another issue where we would need to bring in extra dumpsters, or we wanted to have another pickup, or, we've got 2 planned for 2020. But,
And what about the money we didn't spend on the second pickup that we budgeted for in
we carried that
2019?
over into 2020.
So it's already calculated in
Yes.
the 175. Thoughts from council on?
Do you have a threshold you'd like me to state? And I'll just work back from there. Do you wanna leave like 30,000 in there and then use the difference to help offset? Is that something you'd be comfortable with?
That's an ideal number.
Anybody else? Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that you have a month payment in there, and I think it should be around that. Maybe a little cushion. So I think 30,000 is a good number. I think it would. This is one part of your. This is something that we can, help offset for our residents. The money's in there. We should use it. Obviously, not all of it. Thoughts, Jason or Mike, on that? Good.
Just trying to see where since we've taken the recycling out of our levied general fund and adding it to this, does it show that increase in here? This is just revenue.
This is just the budget before we would do that. But we'd have to add another 11,000 to it, but that's, I think we can still do it. If we can't, I do think we could probably get to that 30,000 mark and still be able to drop the recycling in there. But I'd wanna run the numbers first before I get the budgets.
Well, I guess that's what I'm saying. If we've got a little wiggle room and we need to absorb that in here, we're making more of the general fund and applying it to this for trying to massage the numbers a little bit. Whether it's taking that money one time to offset those expenses or what it is, but I think there's more than one way to get there. But I just wanted to make sure that was represented in here, since we've kind of decided to go down this path.
In the final budget, actually, we'll get another whole set of this with the narratives and all of the, everything that you've got in your budget documents that you have right now, but that'll have all of the changes that we end up making.
So there's going to be essentially another $11,000 in expenditures that's going to be applied to this fund. Okay, thank you.
So of that 11,000, in theory, if you could take that 11,000 from the cash on hand to cover it, or then it would still be around 165.
I think so.
Approximately. I mean, I'm not going to hold you to it. I mean,
Okay.
obviously, you need to look at the numbers, but I just want to say ballpark. That's what the mayor was saying, and what you were.
Right, yeah, I wanna take all of it, relook at that. I might have been a little quick to say 30,000 as a ending balance. Might be more like 29.
But your original estimate of 175 versus 165, was that $11,000 you were recognizing
Right,
there?
in there.
Yep,
yeah.
okay,
And
yep.
not reducing the cash balance any more than it already would.
Okay, yep.
Gotcha.
That's a good point, we have an ending balance.
Anything else? Cemetery? talk about EMS, but did you guys have any other questions on EMS? Seeing none. Special parks, that was the new one that we set up. Special parks, revenue.
That basically will just be driven by donations and projects, so it's, right now, just reflecting some interest earned and the cost went through there as well.
Okay. Tourism?
That is pending. I think that has to come to your commission yet for approval.
When's that, the next meeting?
Probably, Matt said he had it basically done, but he wanted your blessing on it before it was released. He wanted the tourism commission's.
Yeah, I'm not on that. I'm just, when's that next meeting? Is what I was asking. Okay. Okay. But don't we have to have, oh, no, we don't. We just have to have an estimate for the
Because
public hearing. Okay.
there's no tax levy.
Gotcha. Thank you. Okay. What's next?
Municipal
Court? We got a new page today, didn't we? Kind of touched on that already. Does you have any more questions on that? Nope. Okay. City loan fund. Questions? Debt service?
So you've got a list of like the special assessments, accounts, et cetera, that you have in here. I know Ellers has a very rigid opinion about how you use that, but what's your plan for you utilizing the different accounts you have for offsetting the debt this year? You're taking the recommendation of it. Okay. Tell me your story.
I'm a rebel. No,
Okay.
I'm kidding. No, I'm not a rebel. I'm the farthest thing from it. No, really what I look at is where we are, and what the debt service payments look like, what the special assessments that are other, like Farnham and water, and all those look like. If there's any other revenue sources, do we have capitalized interest from another year that we can use, or an interest subsidy? And then I look at trying to do exactly what Ellers does with our bond payments, is trying to keep our debt service payments relatively level going forward. Obviously, I don't have complete control over that because new debt impacts that. But there is a schedule I think we shared earlier where we showed how we're using the gateway special assessment to help manage that levy through 2023 and keep it around that $780,000 a year mark going forward. Now that's before the new debt that we'll have coming on, but that's how I look at it. I don't want the peaks and valleys, and you can kind of see in 15 we were at 760, 16 we were at 560. I don't want to. I want to keep that relatively stable. And that's why on the second page you can kind of see how it's laid out. What I would estimate to use in 2020, estimate to use in 2021 with the ending balance shown there. And then in 2022 would be the final year we'd use the rest of that gateway special assessment money, because 2023, obviously we've got some things falling off and we should be in a better position.
So, under savings then, is that where you're applying kind of the mixed amount that you're collecting from the other street projects, et cetera? You've got those all broken out, I'm just not sure how much of that you're applying to the debt payment. I guess that was my question.
If you look on the page 30, the second page, where it says special assessments payment totals due by project,
Yep.
the gives you an idea of what principal and interest, so roughly about $61,000 is being used to offset the debt service payments for those particular projects.
Okay, that makes sense.
And that's very beneficial.
Oh, yeah.
To help.
It's how we can get projects done continually. Without it, it's a big problem. Be a lot less street projects. Okay. Any more questions on debt? Tip 4. Oh, sorry. Tip 3.
TIF 3 is status quo for 2020. The expenditure period is over. Basically, moving more of staff wages and things away from that because of the lack of activity. And the fact that it is nearing its end. Payments, I did not plan any accelerated debt service payments because there's no benefit to us because we can't close early. So, like I said, everything is just basically status quo based on current debt schedules that we have. It also does reflect 100% of the general fund and the sewer utility being paid off. So now, and in 2020, there won't be any advances to the sewer utility or general fund outstanding from TIF 3 that we zeroed out.
The Commerce Center is obviously empty. Is the how does that come into play at all? It's still valued. Is it still valued?
Still valued. That's that dark store laws, things. That's why they were fighting. Is for businesses that go out of business. So there's nothing in it, but yet the value of the property remained as it is. And right now, they are still valued as they were in 2019 from 2020. So I would expect that we should be basically paying them exactly what we did, which is 100% of the year. So it's really kind of an in-out. We'll get the money in, we turn right around and pay it right there.
Okay. Maybe they can spend that money to lure a tenant, 2 or 5. Okay. Tip 4.
TIF 4, the only really new thing is that I did allocate some staff wages to this this TIF district because of the amount of work that goes into it, both of, for the administrator that we will be hiring and for myself. Matt automatically gets a contribution from the district. So this really just reflects more of a staff level wages and benefits. The other thing that I did is I did include a small dollar amount for engineering, legal, engineering, project engineering, more or less as placeholders because we really don't know what's going to happen out there. If Vita Plus would decide to expand, obviously we need to have something budgeted to at least get us started with some of those project costs for engineering. So those really are placeholders. There aren't any specific projects, I guess, is what I'm saying, in the wings. It's just dollars so that we've got something recognized. TIF 4's with the value for the Crown Family Edition is doing well.
Kim, where did the T grant lay in here? How's that accounted for?
It's a revenue and it should be recorded in here.
Because that's got to stay.
In this
page 2 of that, the developer incentives, that's the amount in the 2020 budget line, that's what we're paying each developer. Okay.
And basically, it's kind of like we talked about with TIF three, it really is an in and an out. We get a certain dollar amount, and a certain percentage goes back to each one of these entities according to the agreements that we have with them.
And what about that last line, stormwater detention basin?
That's the stormwater basin that was put on the Duffy property, and the city has signed an agreement with them to contribute up to $50,000 on that stormwater basin. To date, they haven't presented a bill or asked for reimbursement, but I think there were some steps that they had to go through first before they could come to the city for reimbursement. So that money's in there as a placeholder until that happens.
TIF 5?
We kind of talked about this. There's really, the only thing I have booked in there right now is the annual fee to certify the TIF. I think as activity occurs, then we're gonna have a better idea of what the budget would really look like, and we could do a budget amendment towards the end of next year to kind of reflect what's happening or maybe not happening.
On 415, capital projects.
We talked about this. We'll be finishing the end of the facilities study and 2050 roadmap. Dollar amount that's listed in there is the balance due on the contract. The other items were recycling center improvements and the front of the police department building. Both of those were our best estimates. I know we talked about the building removal, and the fact that that's a challenge and that there needs to be more professional help with determining how that would be taken care of at the recycling center because of the fact that it's filling with water, has asbestos that needs to be removed. As far as the police department building facades, the 23.5 that's shown in there is really the 3 bids that we have and the average between the 3 of them. The gentleman, the mason that I talked to or have been talking to, this weather has just, he's called me twice and just apologized. They've just been, with everything that's going on, they've just gotten so far behind, so I don't have anything new to report on that, unfortunately.
Questions?
Can we get more years represented on this, so just the prior year? What's the thoughts of the council? Just the prior year? Some of these budgets go back to 2015, some 2016. This one only goes back 1 year. I realize Lincoln said consistency is the hobgoblin of simple minds, but I do like consistency.
Provide an argument. I think when it comes to the capital project fund, when you start looking through this, it's where the funding is coming from. So to go 5 years prior, unless you included the funding source for every project, it really wouldn't mean anything. What I look at is taxes levied. That's what I'm looking at. How much are we levying in our budget process to go towards capital projects? Everything below that is pretty much accounted for through a different funding source, or it's a continuing project that's falling across from 1 year to the next, I guess. But I do think looking at taxes levied annually for capital projects is good to have a 5-year history on that. Because some years we don't levy anything for it because we don't have the ability to levy for it. We could be levying more for street projects or street maintenance, I guess, if we really wanted to make a difference in those areas. But I think that's the number that I look at, is how much are we levying for those projects versus just spending it on another source that's not directly levied.
My argument would be, it would be nice to know if we spent $30,000 on a police station remodel 2 years earlier, or whatever the topic was. It would be nice to see some of the
amount levied of we have nothing actually planned for levying for 2020, is that correct, Kim? Okay, so, I'm not trying to convince the council one way or the other, but if you look at the amount that we levied last year, it's almost the exact dollar amount to the amount that we're under levy if we felt like we wanted to go right up to the edge right there. It's exactly the same since we're not levying anything for projects this year.
Well,
Just a
my-
weird coincidence.
Well, it is. I actually that was if there was going to be a place that we wanted to put that, the question would be: Is this is where we would do that? Would it be all of it, or a portion of it, or some of it go here, some of it go rainy day fund type of thing? I guess that would be a discussion we should have. I mean, if we're going scenario 2 without recycling, there will be $26,480 under the levy that we can levy for. This would be that also goes towards your base building. Is that also correct?
What I could suggest, because obviously it's not something you're gonna make a decision on tonight, is if you were interested in having that going up to the levy, putting the 26,480 into some type of contingency, I almost would suggest that you start out by putting it in the general fund, and then identifying what you wanna do with that within the capital project fund, and then requesting that I do a transfer from that contingency line to the capital projects fund to fund whatever it might be that we need to fund through capital projects. It really is kind of a horse apiece, but
My only concern about that is 3 of us may not be up here next year, and what if we don't remember that?
it's a very,
It's very possible. And then in the next year it could be 3 different people up here. So I don't know. I think if we're gonna levy for it, we should put it somewhere specific where it's just not floating out there in the general fund.
You could put $1,000 in 24 different places. You could do that. You could put $12,000 in 2 different places. My point is, I think if you put it under capital projects, you can identify a project. Might be 2 projects. Might be part of the funding for a larger project. But I think that's where it's kind of stands alone. It doesn't get thrown into with all the rest of the laundry, I guess. That's the way that's my perception of this anyway. Not that I'm condoning we do it or not, I guess, but I think that's almost the exact dollar amount right there if we're looking for a place to put the money. I think it's kind of we already have money in contingency. We have money in contingency for wage adjustments, et cetera. I don't want to have 3 or 4 different contingency accounts or rainy day accounts. I think if we're going to levy the money should be spent next year. I'm not a big fan of asking people to pay tax dollars to put it in a savings account.
Fair enough. Yeah.
And putting it into a project. It's $24,000. There's probably a lot of things we'd like to get done. That's
Yeah, no, I can guarantee there's a $26,000 project out there. So, I mean, it's just, it's different. I mean, I think I am advocating to use the full amount, so I think we should, and your point is well taken. I think a good place for it would be in the capital projects. Then you make a fair point about identifying a project that we can spend and spending it as opposed to putting it somewhere and then it ends up not getting spent. You just put it in the savings and we levy for it.
I think the other part is to take care of the budget. You make the budget document. You have that under capital projects, and then we're going to continue to talk about borrowing and bonding next spring. that's, gives us more time to start talking about that. Maybe it's some mill and overlay projects, or we're reducing the bonding or the borrowing on some of those projects too. But it gives us more time to talk about the individual project. Yeah.
All right. Anything else on that fund? All right, sewer. Questions? Nothing? Okay, sewer. Oh, nothing under sewer capital.
Fund deposits, 2020's already been decided, which is the Huber screen, slip storage, and I'm sorry, the other project escapes me, but we know that that's what's coming down the pike in 2020. HVAC, the air exchange system for the Sounds building, that's being done this year. The filter painting hopefully will be done yet this year. The roof is in the regular budget, the last phase, which is the lab building. And Hibbert Street is being paid for in cash out of the replacement funds.
Wasn't there like a controller at a lift station that was?
Yep, that's gonna be replaced, but that's part of the regular budget.
Okay, gotcha. Right.
Can I ask what happened with the town of Elba this year?
They had I from the flooding, that's why it went up so high. And they actually had I guess one of their lift stations was maybe not the lift station, force main was actually underwater, taking water.
Okay.
You can see the town of the lake revenues. It's the first year in the water quality trading program that we have for the town of the lake.
Anything else on sewer? Okay, May Ward, touched on this earlier. Added $500. Kinda show a commitment to keep that, fund growing. And, hopefully we, get some, advertising out there to work with Matt to see if there's something he can do to start using some of it. There's nothing else on May Ward. Okay. Any other general overall questions or things we missed? Ed?
I would make a pitch that we use the $22,000 in disposal of fixed assets fund and go ahead and throw it in the capital improvement fund that we just discussed. The boys have need for and/or contingency. This money is talking about levying dollars. Those monies were levied ages ago and are riding on our books. It's $22,000 that we urge that we find a use for is one thing. If you want to discuss it, otherwise I have two other points.
That's not gonna be the final number though, right? I thought he was going, he had another car for sale? Or two? When,
Is there'll be numbers every year we dispose of property, I assume, but as
Right.
of right now on our books, it's 21,899.46 estimated at the year end. I urge we apply that to either contingency or this was a well case made for the capital improvement fund.
I'm not sure how capital funds work, but it seems like there's a lot of projects that get run through capital projects at different times. I think that it's appropriate to spend that money on a capital project. It's about identifying the best place to utilize the funding, I think, because of how we raise the money, I guess.
Earlier this year, we had this, several times we had to dig and find money for whether it was how much street maintenance can we afford for mill and overlay. Oh, we can go this far, but not that far because we just don't have it in the budget. If we had a larger contingency fund, we could have funded more mill and overlay, for example. That's why I'm advocating that we bolster the contingency fund. We made a very good case for bolstering the capital improvement fund, but as I look at this budget, I see $21,900 sitting there, not doing anything, and I would like to see us budget it because it's levied funds from years past that are sitting on our books, and I think it's time that we move them towards something.
Just don't know what fund we put that into.
Contingency.
You could leave it in the capital projects fund, but then find a purpose for it versus the
Yeah.
Tying it to a project.
That's what we need to do. And I mean, the thing that worries me is today it's, valid points about mill and overlay, but, in 6 months, 3 other people could have a different thing that they want. And I guess it doesn't, I guess it's gonna be spent no matter where it is. It can be spent, whether it's a contingency or there. I think we need to be better at identifying those projects and actually spending it.
Since I've been on the council, this money has been there. I'm advocating that either this council or the next council find money for it. We're here till April at least. We can take it out of this fund and put it somewhere else. Is my strong suggestion.
Zach was talking about buying a piece of equipment to attach to the front end loader. You just put it in his budget. There's the perfect fund for it. I don't know how much it is, but I agree. Spend it on something, the appropriate thing, I guess. And mill and overlay, I've had heartburn with borrowing money for 10 years to do mill and overlay that made me last 8 years, but I think mixing in some of these other funds kind of helps alleviate that pain a little bit. But I agree.
One other general question that I forgot to ask, where does interest show up in revenues? I know in their monthly treasurer's report, each of these funds is interest, and is that booked in revenues somewhere in some line? Interest on investments. All right, very good. I just missed it. Thank you. And then, I just want to make sure I make the pitch that for example, in Hillside Cemetery under revenues, there's a line for carryover funds at the top line. And in other funds that are using carryover funds, it would be nice to see that identified up top as a line and then potentially also in the comment section as it was in Hillside. I found that helpful. So, a pitch for that, whether the council agrees or not, of course.
Make it, like you said, make it clear that actually funds being carried over.
Right, as well as in individual funds, such as Hillside Cemetery, where there are carryover funds being used, top line highlighting, as well as in the narrative on the side. I find more helpful. I don't know about anybody else. I'm doing my homework. I found that very helpful. Liked the example, therefore want to pitch it.
there any reason that couldn't be on each fund?
If we have carryovers, it should be. There should be a line for, but I think in the general fund, the title is unapplied or applied undesignated funds. Something like that, it's not very clear.
So, okay,
I
so
think
what I think Ed is saying, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Ed, but if you have $150-something thousand here on page 4, right? But we know that at least 86,000 of that was from the police department.
Oh, so it's split it out by, oh, I gotcha.
So we
Okay,
can look on each
now
fund
light
to
bulb
see-
just went on
I mean, you
by-
have it in the comments.
by use and not just a total.
Right.
Yeah, thank you.
Is that what you were getting at, Ed?
100%.
Okay.
Thank you for better explaining.
I would also like to see that. I think it is very helpful.
I
And it
know I
also
have
can
a-
provide a snapshot of every year, how much you're carrying over, and you can see where you're maybe make better budgeting decisions. You're carrying over $50,000 a year in certain lines. Maybe people consider, like with the wages, you don't know. You have to guess that it's going to be 10 staff numbers, but you could also probably.
Or you have to add up the comments column numbers, and it
Manually.
appearing in both places would be very helpful.
Yeah,
And
agreed.
you can make sure the numbers match and see it and have it make sense for all the reasons Amy just said.
Is that something you could still get in one of our final revisions?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. I actually, there is a schedule right before the general fund tab, I think. Or right about before the, it's R10 is the title, page number, but report 10 is what the R stands for. It's kind of a master list of everything, but I think putting it in both places is really helpful.
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay. Any more questions on budget as we've discussed so far tonight? Any of the funds? Okay, I believe, we've gone through all 6 items on our agenda for the special committee of the whole, so unless there's anything else, we could adjourn and then start our next meeting after a small break. So I'd entertain a motion to adjourn if you guys are ready.
Move that we do adjourn.
A motion and a second to adjourn. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Opposed? All right, we will take a 5-minute break and come back on for the regular meeting of the city council. Do we need to stop then? Do we need a break?
right, good evening. I have 9 p.m. Mayor told me here to call Columbus Common Council special meeting to order for Monday, November 11th, 2019. Pat, when you're ready, could you please take a roll call for us?
Johnson,
Here?
Ryan,
Here.
Tyler,
Here.
Tom,
Here.
Traxler.
Here.
Do we want to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance that's on our agenda for the evening? Or yes, we should. There we go. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. This meeting has been noticed in accordance with state statutes and local ordinances. Next item is to approve the agenda. We have 2 agenda items, and actually we only need 1 agenda item this evening. New business number 2 is not needed for any action this evening.
Make a motion to approve the agenda with, striking number 2 from new business.
Motion and a second to approve the agenda with one item, striking number 2. Any discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we have no old business this evening, so we move on to new business number 1, which is to consider and take action regarding interim city administrator services. The reason we're having a special meeting tonight is so the council can act before our next regular meeting, which is over a week away. There has been presentations given to the council from the 3 different consulting firms, PAA, GovHR, and IPR, that provided proposals for search for the new city administrator position, and also interim services. I believe we had very clear consensus that the council was looking at going at PAA for the interim services, along with the other services we're receiving from them. David Berner is the candidate who would be serving as interim. The rate is listed in here. There's hourly charge of $75, and then also a per trip charge of roughly $23. I don't know whether we need to specify anything in the action, but I think in talking with staff, we've had some discussion about the number of hours we would need that person here. I don't have a number for you right now, but I think that we just need to approve this, get David in here, and start working with staff and finding out what those things are. So that's why we have this on the agenda for this evening. Any questions?
Then I would make a motion that we contract with PAA to hire David Berner, Kevin
David.
Berner on an interim basis as our city administrator.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to go with PAA. David Berner as the interim administrator for the city of Columbus. Any discussion on that? If there's no discussion, could we please take a roll call on that?
Johnson,
Aye.
Ryan,
Aye.
Tyler,
Aye.
Traxler.
Aye.
Unanimous.
Thank you. There's nothing left, so I'll entertain the motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, second.
Motion and second to adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Stand adjourned. Thank you.